Hi, friends, and welcome to another edition of 15241 Today Talk. Glenn Ward is our producer-director. Linda Dzinski is our coordinating producer. And we have a real great guest on hand with us today. Let me tell you a little story. If you were to go to the North Hills School District and you go into the middle school, because that's where the North Hills basketball gymnasium is, and you go into the door and then you go up the steps, and if you go down the hallway, you see a huge display for the individuals that have been named to the North Hills Sports Hall of Fame, like LeVar Arrington and Eric Kasparovich or Pat Carey, and Mike White is a member of the North Hills Sports Hall of Fame. Mike, it's a real pleasure for Jim and me to have you on the show with us. Let me first of all ask you, when was it that you knew, at what age did you know you wanted to be a sports writer?
It was actually probably my junior year in high school, Lanny. And not to get too much into this, but it's kind of a funny story how I got into it. It was, I was in, it was called the NBA sponsor, Pepsi Hot Shot. It was basically the punt, pass, and kick of the NBA. And you would have area, contests, and it was my junior year in high school. I was the Western PA champ. I shot like around here in Ohio and one up there, and I was shooting at halftime of the Cavaliers game. You shoot 2 rounds before the game, different spots on the court. And if I won that week, I was going to the end. They were taking me to the NBA All-Star game to shoot the following week. You try to go to be the national champion. Anyway, this small paper in the North Hills, it was a tabloid, came out free. I don't mean to just be too long, but this is how I got into this. It came out free in supermarkets once a week. It was called the North Hills Free Press. Basically a lot of steel workers, but they covered about 7 or 8 high school teams in the North Hills, including North Hills. So they did a story on me being in this contest, Pepsi Hot Shot, and they had an ad in there, writers wanted. And I always wanted to be, kind of like you maybe, a sportscaster, radio, TV maybe. I said, you know what, I'm going to call up. And here, the sports editor was Mark Madden. And I covered North Hills football and basketball. I was no longer playing. I was no longer playing at that time. And Mark was working at the Post-Gazette. And the next year, he recommended me at the Post-Gazette. And I started there my senior year in high school. The first thing I did was address envelopes to athletic directors. Just kind of moved up from there. So that's how it all began, because of basketball and with Mark Madden. I used to drive my stories once a week up to his house in Troy Hill, drop them off, and he would take them to the office. My mom, my first year, typed up, because I couldn't type yet. When I was a junior, she would type up my story. I'd take it up to Mark Madden's house. That's how it all started, Lanny.
Well, you do such a fabulous job covering high school sports. It's extremely remarkable the way you handle high school sports. Is that something that you thought about it back then, or was there ever an opportunity for you to move away from high school sports and become a columnist and move up the ladder? Yeah.
And, well, I go back. I always, even when I was a kid, liked high school sports. I followed it in the paper. I used to, when I was a little kid, pretend I was a high school player. And I always and I followed it. And I always remember as a kid names like Pete Annamarino and that name. And I'm watching the Channel 13 games on basketball every year. The Farrell Steelers and the mystique of them. And I always liked it. So when I got into this, it was covering high school sports. And then at the Post-Gazette, I was covering it. And, I come from a family with 3 brothers. One played major college basketball. So I always liked sports. But I just found my niche here, and I liked it. And, through my career, I've done other things. I covered West Virginia football for a while, a lot of other radio, TV stuff, published my own magazine for a couple years on the side. We used to have the Dapper Dan Rombone Classic. I was the assistant director for that with Sonny Vaccaro for a few years. So I've done a number of other things, but I always did high schools, and I always liked it. And yes, to be honest, they came to me and hey, would you want to cover the Steelers? And I had bits of doing a sidebar of Pitt and the Steelers, and no, just leave me alone. I kind of always, when I was younger, wanted to maybe cover Pitt athletics, football and basketball. But Lanny, as you get older, and Jim probably, you see, I mean, a great example. Look what he did in high school. You see, you know what? I get to have kids. Do I really want to be in Providence, Rhode Island on Tuesday night in January when my kids are at home, maybe playing a basketball game, things like that? So, kind of carved my niche, and I've always loved it. And I love kids, and I think one of the things also that I've really enjoyed is my relationship with some coaches, a lot of coaches. That has been great to me and dear to my heart.
Does that include me? Or?
Yes, it does, Jim. You know that.
Well, tell the story. I know you want to tell the story.
Which one?
The night I thought you should interview somebody else.
Oh, that. Yeah. Well, the first time I was in college, first time he remembers this too. I covered a game he played at Newcastle. Gigantic win for you with Pat McCullough.
You were there?
Yes, I was there. And I think I'd covered a game against Mount Lebanon with you a year or two earlier, but I didn't talk to you. This game, I talked to him, and I was in college. And he was, I said, this guy's kind of interesting.
Interesting.
Yes. And yes, there were, everybody knows.
That was.
Jim doesn't like to lose, and and that's okay. You know what? I wish we even had more people that didn't like to lose so much. But it was after, the famous one was after North Allegheny game. He lost on a Thursday night game. And myself and Rich Emmert were waiting for him, and he came out and said, "What do you want to talk to me for? Go talk to Jim Rankin. He won." So, but many lasting memories of Jim.
That doesn't sound like me, does it?
No, it does not.
I didn't think so. But, Mike, you have done a fabulous job. How many years now at the Post-Gazette in that category, high school?
Well, if you count the years I worked in college, it's been since 79, so 41, and they hired me right when I got out of college. So full-time high school editor, like 33, 35, 36.
Well, I know this, you're everywhere. If there's a big high school event, you're there. And, you also have a good style of presenting what you see. And I still enjoy reading your columns. And, of course, I'm a little biased. You wrote a nice one not too long ago about David Pantelis here in Upper St. Clair.
Really like that kid.
He's a good one. I think more colleges ought to be interested in this young man.
You told me about him 2 years ago when you said this kid's going to be.
Well, you know what gets me is he dominates in every game, whether it's basketball or football. The guy that's making the biggest plays is David Pantelis. So.
But Jim, and this is the truth about him. I think he really took a jump up last year in football. And I know he lives by you and just helped you move, right? So you use him for a number of things. But I really was convinced of him, and this has happened with other players. As a football player, when I saw him play basketball last year.
Against Butler.
A few times. I saw his body, saw his movement, saw his athletic ability, and I've been convinced by some pretty good players in football what they did on the basketball court, including Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah. Well, we had a quarterback, I'm sure you'll remember, Patrick McShane.
Yes, little guy.
So anyhow, I'm watching the WPIL championship basketball game his sophomore year. And he came off the bench, in and out, but in the fourth quarter, he scored 9 points in a crucial, this was the Sean Lee senior year. And Patrick hit 2 threes from the corner, and then he drove in and made the layup and got fouled. He scored 9 points in a really short amount of time. So I'm sitting there.
Against Mount Lebanon.
Yes.
Yes, I remember it.
And I'm sitting there, as you were talking about, and I'm watching this basketball game, but I'm thinking football. And I thought, this young man, because we had used him a little bit at quarterback and used him at wide receiver. And I thought, this young man's got to have the ball in his hands every play. Not when somebody else can maybe throw him the ball. He's going to have the ball every play. So thus was born his full-time quarterback career.
I believe it. And I've said that, but story with Gronkowski, this is a true story. You can ask my wife. We brought it up since a number of times, saying how athletes show themselves. A football player sometimes more in basketball. Even Tom Bradley, when he would recruit, would see that. My son was a sophomore in North Hills, played basketball, and played at Woodland Hills. He played in the JV game. This was Gronkowski's senior year, the only year at Woodland Hills. And he only caught 9 passes his senior year. I covered him once or twice, saw him play football. You know, obviously he stood out because he was big. And, you know, and when you're covering a game as a reporter, the offensive line, you don't follow as much because you have to follow the ball and keep stats on the ball. Well, he came out in basketball, and I knew he was good in basketball, and I saw him warming up. And I'm watching him warm up, and you couldn't dunk, but he's going up like doing 360s and right there. And the game started then, and his quickness, his second jump, the quickness of his jumping ability, and he's slamming things. And it was by near halftime, and I turned to my wife, and I said, see that guy? I don't know what his number was. See that number 44? Yeah, he's going to be in the NFL. She said, how do you know? I said, because there are not 6'6" kids around that can do what he's doing right now athletically. Now, that's a true story. Now, I couldn't predict he would be what he is. But I did say that he was amazing on the basketball court for a guy his size.
Mike, I've been doing high school sports now for 10 years, and I love doing it, interfacing with the athletic directors and the coaches and the players. And
kudos to you, Lanny, for doing that. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It really is. I think it's a really neat thing. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you. But when I teach at Waynesburg, I tell my students, and a lot of them are doing high school sports, and I tell them that one of the challenges for doing high school sports is there's no sports information director, no PR director. So how was it that you were able to put together a department and have it organized, have all the records, all the information that you're going to have so you can sit down and do the stories and talk about this is the first time since whenever that something's happened?
Well, Lanny, I owe a lot to what I have to a guy named Steve Hecht. He was the high school sports editor before me. And when I was in college, he would let me, it was a case of, hey, there's a big game at Uniontown tonight or next week. Oh, I'll go. Well, that's pretty far away. I don't care. I'll go. And I just did anything. But he started, and I was part of it in 1979. It was never done before. We started doing statistics for the whole WPIL. And I was in high school at the time, and there was about 4 of us. We call every coach or a stat person and get the stats every week. That had never been done before in any sport where the entire WPIL. And then we did that in basketball also. And then what happened, we have part-timers, and it's how I broke into this business. It's how many of them, taking scores over the phone and keeping stats. And that started the stat keeping for the entire WPIL. And as it evolved, and we have part-time people, for example, in football, they get stats and put them on our website every week from the stat keeper at each school. But that started the whole thing. Nobody kept all-time WPIL rushers or things like that anymore. And what happened is, honestly, I started, I would keep the year-end stats every year. And so I just kind of started, from what we had, keeping records, looking back. I went on microfilm and got every year's stats of finishing, and it just evolved, and it has evolved. And I'm the one that has a lot of the records that kept them, and that's where it all started in '79. We were the first to do that, and just me saying, you know what, I'm going to look back 30 years and do things like that. So that's how we do things. And you talk about being prepared. I look things up before the game. Now, there were things like a guy named Mike Costa passed away, and John Smonsky, who's since passed away. John Smonsky kept every high school football score from 1956 to 1999 you should see this, in a binder. Typed out every school schedule And then we'll put the scores in, type them every game for every team by team, every year, Lanny. And it's in a binder about this thick on loose leaf paper. When he died in, I want to say 2007, around there, his family called me up, and it wasn't in his will, but his object was for me to have that binder. And it really is a neat thing. I mean, I do have every score for every team, counting what we have at the Post-Gazette and then what he had back to 56. So I have every score from 56 on in football.
Do you worry about scooping your competition, getting out in front of stories? It must be a proud aspect of your life that because you're so dominant in covering high school sports that the people, athletic directors, people at WPIAL are going to call you and let you know about information?
Well, it's all, as you go through this business of developing sources, really, Lanny, and, doing this for as long as I have, you get to know people, and it's not so much of maybe them calling you as much as maybe, all right, that, this coaching job is open. Well, you call this guy and that guy that and you find out this guy and that guy are involved, and it's basically just networking. And yeah, there is still, I don't think it's as heated overall as it used to be when you had the Post-Gazette and the Press and then the Tribune. But there's still, you want to get you want to get some of the stories first. There's some guys around that do a very good job. Chris Harlan does a great job at the Trib with things. And, we want to get the stories first. That's the way it was when the newspapers were around years ago. And it's still the way it was now. And it's one of the things that I still like, to be honest. I don't know, I consider myself very competitive. I coach basketball. Jim knows I've coached junior high basketball in North Hills for a number of years. I've always kind of dreamed of coaching high school, but with my job, I can't because I don't think you want your high school editor coaching a high school team. So, it's a way to compete too. I mean, we were just talking before we went on about golf, and I still love going out with guys and competing for $20 or something to eat afterward. So it still is a way to compete, and I that's one of the things I still like about it.
What do you do on, let's say, a Thursday and Friday during football season when you're going to cover the game of the week? How much time do you spend in prepping for that one game?
If it's a football game, I'll sit down. I do still like to take I still call it a pregame nap on Fridays in the afternoon because a lot of times still something comes up or I have to, do some kind of story still. It might have broke on a Friday or something. And what I'll do, Jim, on a Friday night, we'll have 4 people in the office writing roundups from the games that come in. And what I'll do on Thursday and Friday is I'll look at the games and look up some information, give them a couple notes, maybe like, if Upper St. Clair's playing Mount Lebanon, it's not a game that we're covering. I might say, hey, Upper St. Clair's won 5 in a row against Mount Lebanon. And you only use it maybe one sentence, but it's,
Sure.
It's where he does it. You get those note cards when he does, it's all that type of stuff. And then I'll look up the information, try to get some trends. Maybe if Upper St. Clair, like I said, maybe they've won 8 in a row against Mount Lebanon, or maybe this kid needs 1,000 yards, and you take some of the stuff with you, what the records are, and a lot of stuff you don't use, but sometimes you go there with an idea. Like if it's something statistical, I might go there with the idea, well, hey, if Jim Render wins this, he will, have won his 10th conference in a row. So maybe that's going to be my lead to the story, if you win. So, and that stuff all helps. But there are things to do Friday during the day. I usually work at night, Well, I don't get home, and by the time you write your story, you get home, and I'll check our the leading rushers list that we run, leading passers, just to see if there's any mistakes or anything. And now, things are so different the way you cover games. And sometimes, a lot of times now, I'll have video that I'll go home and post to my story. So it's, getting home and not getting done until maybe 1 a.m. So it's changed, Jim, how you cover things. It used to be I could just watch the game. And if you had to keep your own stats, keep your stats. But now you're tweeting updates. It's just the way it is. I'm not here to say I don't like that. I think it adds some things. But it has changed. Covering games has changed drastically in the last 10 to 15 years.
Electronics.
Yes, and the social media. And I used to do a blog on Friday nights, honestly, for a few years. And a lot of the basketball coaches that I knew, I would have them. They would text me. This was before Twitter, really. They would text me updates on the score. And I'd do a live blog on our website that was updating constantly, say, from Danny Holzer, Upper St. Clair's beating, Peters Township. But it's changed drastically. It's more work, without a doubt. You don't watch the game as much as you used to. And I don't like that. And I used to like to watch things on the sidelines and, coaches. But you don't get to watch the game as in depth, I think, nowadays as you did. You
don't mean Danny Holzer would text you while he's coaching a game?
No. The basketball coaches would text me football scores.
Oh, okay.
That's how I got a lot of them,
Okay.
that were live during the game. And then Twitter came along, and that kind of did that live blog, got rid of that.
I was ready to call Danny up.
Another aspect of doing high school sports is that your working conditions are not ideal, right?
Yes.
I remember doing a Bethel Park baseball game one time, and I said on the air, think about this, folks. I'm at a picnic table behind home plate. Greg Brown tonight is at Dodger Stadium, okay? So totally different. So how do you deal? Press boxes in Western Pennsylvania for football are not always very
They've gotten
good.
a lot better. They've gotten a lot better. And Lanny, oh God, I have a number of stories from the olden days. And when I first started out in this thing, and the part-timers and guys who weren't around for a while, you used to have to I used to write my story out longhand, call the paper, have it done soon, call the paper and read it to a person as they typed it into a system. And then they came out with the computers, and one of the computers, Radio Shack, you had to take a phone into couplers, into suction cups, basically, and put it in there, hit a button to send your story to the paper. Well, a lot of times it didn't work on those pay phones and those phone lines because the phone lines weren't clear. That was a chore all the time. I've been in middle of town. I remember going to see Derek Bonner in Mapletown, was going for the WPL rushing record. I covered, the only time I've ever been to cover a game in Greene County. They played Jefferson Morgan. And I had to go in the town of Jefferson. I guess there was maybe 3 stores. There are 3 buildings in the middle of town. It was the only payphone around. And you're also there. You're the last one to leave when you cover a game as a high school reporter. And the janitors or the custodians are there. Hey, come on, get out of here. Well, give me 10 more minutes. I had the cops come on me one time at Duquesne High School because I kept on saying to the custodian, I need 5 more minutes. I'm almost done. 5 more minutes. And then I said, I've done this too. I'll give you, to pay custodians, let me stay another 20 minutes. Well, he got mad. He called the cops on me, and I wasn't done. And next thing you know, cops are coming. Sir, who are you? You need to get out of here. I was a little scared. But that's a true story. But you just have to, it's one of the things, if you can cover a high school football game on deadline and make it a decent piece, you can do anything. True.
Well, I tell my students, if you can cover a high school sporting event and do all the
Yes,
prep
without a
work that
doubt.
you need to do without anybody handing you that stuff, then that's a great starting point. So if you become successful and people are giving you the information and it's all set up. Give me another render story.
Oh.
Give me another render story.
Another Jim Render story. Well, you know what? This is the truth. I don't remember if it was after a Bethel Park game that he lost, and this was maybe 10 years ago. And at Bethel, and I got him as he was going to the locker room, and and he wasn't that bad after a loss, and he said something else, and I turned to him, and this is true. I said, you know what, Jim? I love you. I sent that. I said that, and getting to know him has been a real treat. A lot of people, that exterior, they don't know him as well.
Yes.
And I think getting to understand him has helped. And I don't know anybody. If I had a kid to play football, I'd want him to play for a Jim Rinder. Yeah, I've always said that. Hey, every coach gets a little crazy and at times or whatever. But you know what? I always felt that the way he coached, basically two things. If you just work hard and play hard and shut up and do your job, you're going to be all right with him. Am I right?
Yes.
Tell me about your children.
My children, I have 3 sons. They all played sports growing up, too. The oldest one is a pharmacist. His name's Mike.
Mike.
He's a junior. No, he's not a junior. He's not a junior. He's got a different middle name. He's a pharmacist. My middle son is 29, Sean. He played basketball and golf at North Hills, and they went to the WPL semifinals his senior year and went to the WPL finals in golf, which was a gigantic upset when he did that because they were beating Shady Side and Upper St. Clair and all Fox Chapel and all those, and none of their kids, a great accomplishment, none of their kids belonged to a country club, and they made it to the WPL championships his senior year at North Hills. Anyway, he's been in the basketball coaching world. He was in the G League as a basketball operations intern for 1 year in Erie, down at IMG Academy for a couple years. He was a North Hills assistant, a varsity assistant head coach and JV coach for 3 years. A great story. I'll never forget the beat Tim McConnell in the playoffs. The head coach went down, Buzz Gabus, during the game. He collapsed. And my son had to take over his playoff game, quarterfinals. And Charville was the defending champion. He had to take over, and they beat him. He knocked off Tim McConnell. I still don't let him forget that. Hey, who beat you that year? Who knocked you off? He's 20. He's coaching at a prep school in Ohio, called Andrews Osborne Academy. They have a national type program with guys that come in and major college guys. So he's in the coaching world. My youngest son is Danny's 24, and he works for Snyder Downs downtown. He played basketball and golf also at North Hills. So that's my wife, beautiful wife, Daria.
None of your sons had the McCurry experience.
No, you know what? Sean wanted to play football, and we said, younger, no, because I know a lot of you coaches, no, you're not playing. We'll let you play in 7th grade. That's early enough. And I know a lot of coaches who do that with their sons. And so we let him play in 6th grade, and then he said, I don't want to do it. And he didn't want to do it. He goes back, you know what, I wish I would have played maybe in high school, though, just to let it up to them, and they didn't want to then. So,
Mike, we've got 2 minutes. I just want to wrap up, and I know it's not a lot of time, about the COVID-19 situation. This is August the 10th that we were 2020 recording this show. Should the WPIAL play football in the fall?
There's so many tentacles to this story, Lanny. And I'll try to make this fast. And no matter what you do, there's going to be people that, nah, you can't do that. Yeah, all right, well, then we're going to do, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do this. You can't do that. There's a part of me that says that their coaches, they should move it to the spring. But then there's a part of me that says there have been so many inconsistencies, and there's a lot of the youth and recreation programs have been playing sports in the summer, and I haven't heard of any big outbreaks because of that. I really think they should try to maybe play in the fall. Try it. If there's outbreaks, shut it down, play it in the spring. It just, what bothers me about the whole thing is people refuse to adjust. If you move fall sports this spring, you got the soccer, the cup people and the club people, the soccer, that you can't do that. And then the baseball people, if you move baseball back, well, a lot of kids play travel ball. You can't do that. You got to do something. So we can't just sit here and throw up our hands, so adjust a little bit. I personally think they ought to try the fall sports, and they definitely should do golf and cross country, and I think girls volleyball and tennis in the fall. Do them anyway. You social distance, and try football maybe. And if it doesn't go well, shut it down. And play it in the spring. But honestly, August 10th, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, Mike, I knew the 30 minutes would blow by quickly. And again, congratulations to you for the fabulous job you do covering high school sports.
Thanks,
and Jim and I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you for all
Two
that.
legends I'm here with.
Pardon?
Two legends I'm here with.
Get out of here.
Thank you for all the nice things you've written about me over the years.
Deserve it, buddy.
I don't know about that. But
Mike White from the Post-Gazette, high school beat writer on 15241 Today Talk. Thanks for joining us.